right, the next speaker is Roger Samson from REAP Canada, advancing the farm sector to improve switchgrass varieties.
Thanks. It's great to be back in Elora. When I was a student at the University of Guelph. I had a summer job at the Elora Research Center, and believe it or not, that was the first time I saw switchgrass. They were looking at it as a midsummer grazing species, Jack Winch. And so I like Jack Winch quite a bit as a professor. I took his crop course that he had on using crops for land reclamation, specifically the mining industry. And switchgrass came up there again. So I did a summer research project with Jack, studying switchgrass and it just made a lot of sense. It was such a beautiful low input perennial crop. Then I'm going to talk about how the farm sector really has an opportunity right now to develop switchgrass, and how the conditions when we started our research on switchgrass in the 1990s, to me, look like it's a repeat. We're going back into a very difficult period for surplus farm production, and that was the main driver for us in terms of getting onto switchgrass in the first place. So we started as an organization, we started working around sustainable agriculture. And then we found in the early 1990s, there was too many farmers, too much production of food. And federal government at the time was really like encouraging farmers to exit and get bigger farms because it was just a big subsidy. And so we looked at what we could do. And the most logical thing was to work on demand enhancement, creating non-food markets. So that's how I got into switchgrass, and really pleased to see how well OBPC is doing. 50% or more growth this past year, and let's just hope it continues.
We might need you to click on the screen first.
Just click on the screen. We have a real professional here. So there's really like, three rationales right now to develop it in Ontario. First one is the need to develop non-food bioindustrial markets, the repeat of the 1990s problem. Second one is that what we found is that Ontario is the best place in North America to grow switchgrass seed. And there's two reasons for that. One is that Ontario has a situation where you don't frequently get a severe drought. You get modest droughts, but you don't get severe droughts. The other thing is you don't really have any heat stress during the seed maturation process. So those two things, drought and heat stress, really cause a real problem with switchgrass seed. So everybody talks about this dormant seed problem. It's not a problem for our seed in Ontario. And big plump seed, if you want big plump seed, you get it from REAP Canada varieties grown in Ontario. So we have a situation where we can produce the biggest and best quality seed in the world, right here in Ontario. And if you look at the edible soybean market, who does Japan come to get their edible soybeans? No heat stress, they come to Ontario. So there's a real nice climatic advantage of growing switchgrass seed in Ontario as an export business. And it's a high value market. And the third thing is that we can strengthen the agri-food sector by like improving dairy health. Farmers that feed switchgrass to their dry cows don't see the veterinarians for milk fevers. So we have like testimonials from farmers. Since I started feeding switchgrass, I haven't had a milk fever on the farm in 3 years. So there's some real advantages with switchgrass. This to me is like, people need to understand this chart. This to me is just scary. This is like the 1990s all over again. So this is total production of corn in North America. 17.5 billion bushels this past year. And this is corn ethanol. So George Bush saved the farmer by inventing corn ethanol and expanding it. These were the dark days for agriculture. And as soon as George Bush got the whole corn ethanol industry going in 2006, switchgrass was in a State of the Union address, the whole ethanol idea. this gap closed. So there wasn't a surplus production. Now you can see where that gap is. See, there's a real problem. Breeders and the farmers are doing a fabulous job growing more and more corn, but there's no demand for it. Corn ethanol is flat. And this is where it gets worse. So today, I could say that my neighbors in Quebec, nobody's looking at a conventional internal combustion engine, ICE engine, versus an EV or a hybrid. Just nobody would buy a car in my neighborhood. It would be a conventional engine. And this is what's happening in China. When I was in China 25 years ago, everybody is driving electric bikes. Now everybody drives an electric car that has any money. So the market for ethanol, to me, it's done. It's an old technology, this internal combustion engine, and it's going the way out. And that's going to cause a major crisis for farmers because this ethanol demand is not only going to go sideways, it's quite likely that it's going down. So it's going to sunset. So there's going to be a tremendous problem with surplus production capacity. And the numbers are there. Like if you look at if you study the sector, you'll see that the fast displacement of the internal combustion engine is happening. And with the current crisis right now in the Gulf, like it's really changing people's opinion on the internal combustion engine and the whole gasoline. To me, it's just done. And it's just a matter of like, we're 10 years away from being done. So this is another one that's pretty interesting. And that's that the Canadian forestry industry has got a problem. And the problem is the availability of affordable wood because they've overcut the product. And so there's a real sustainability crisis. So in the mid-1990s, we did research with Pulp and Paper Research Institute of Canada. We showed you could make switchgrass into paper. We grew the switchgrass in Montreal. We exported the product to China. They pulped it in China in a rotary digester, brought it back to Montreal, and we made paper. So we've proven that it can be done. And 30 years later, we have the resource substitution need to develop the sector. There's a company in Tennessee called Genera. They built a $350 million facility to convert switchgrass and miscanthus into pulp products. There's companies right now in Europe that are looking at using products like cereal straw and switchgrass to make pulp. So in my view, the conditions are ideal for the development of the pulp sector from switchgrass. Like I think it's just like we've always felt that it was going to come. Now it's starting to come. And that like it just like I'm a canoeist. I've canoed a lot and I've seen the forest decline in Canada. Just go, if anybody goes onto Google Maps and look up any area in the northern forest, you'll see what's happening to the bush. It's just gone. So here we are, renewable fiber, like ecological clear cutting. Every year you get a harvest of around 10 to 15 ton per hectare. And it's about 48% cellulose, the stems of these grasses. So we're incredibly optimistic that this is may not be an opportunity for Ontario, like because the fiber costs, it's a little bit more expensive to grow hay crops here than it would be in a place like Manitoba or Minnesota. But there's a tremendous opportunity to grow the seed for those farmers that plant. This is our big blue stem. We started working on this 20 years ago. That's 10 breeding cycles. And you know, it's 11, 12 feet tall. Or if you're a young guy, it's about a young woman, 3.5 meters. And the same thing, that's our switchgrass selection. We've gone through 11 breeding cycles on the switchgrass. And you know, these are beautiful fiber crops now. So we're ready for people to want to make nice fiber products. And perennial, you know, we can grow them for at least 7 years. So we're quite pleased that we started this breeding work like 30 years ago. And finally, we've got materials in the market. We've got 5 varieties we're selling commercially in North America, and 4 we're selling in Europe. And we have them like adapted to different zones. So we have some there that we pulled out of South Dakota. We bred them and they'd be good for this region up into southern Canadian prairies. We have other ones that we got out of Illinois, like Caven Rock. It was found in southern Illinois. This material is more adapted to the east. So we have materials, upland switchgrass. We have 7 upland switchgrasses that we have under development, and 5 have been commercialized. And the beauty of upland switchgrasses is it's really drought tolerant. So if you get a severe drought, lowland switchgrass or miscanthus will get beaten up by the drought. The yield can be cut in half. Upland switchgrass and big blue stem maintain their yields. So, when we got into this, we didn't really understand what we were getting into, but we realized that you got to protect these materials. So we ended up doing like half of our research program right now is on plant breeders' rights. So just doing morphological measures. So we would have about 10 measures we measure on these grasses. And we have 5 varieties that we've already got protected. And we have a couple of graduate students that we work with from McGill University have done a great job with us in helping us with all these morphological studies. So things like the height and the stem width and how many nodes it has, like how tall it is. All these factors need to be identified to get you your plant breeders' rights. So we have plant breeders' rights in Canada. We have 7 protected in the US. We have 5 under protection and 4 in Europe. And these are our certificates, and they're good for 20 years. So we have 20 years protection, and some of these varieties will be replaced in about 10 years. But we do have 20 years protection. And these are what our seed labels would look like with a patent protection from the USDA, rather plant breeders' rights protection from the USDA. And generally speaking, we have very low dormancy. Our seed would be the biggest in the market and the lowest dormancy grown here in Ontario. And this year we might have as much as 1,000 acres of our varieties in switchgrass seed production. And this would be, like that combine is about, I believe it's about 8.5 feet, 9 feet tall. And that grass is pretty much there. And that's actually Phyllis Nott. If Don Nott's online, I have a video coming from his farm a little bit later. Speak of the devil, Don Nott. Everybody knows Don within the OVPC for sure. So Don got into switchgrass 20 years ago. 20 years ago, he thought he'd try to plant switchgrass, and he planted 350 acres to try the crop. How many farmers in Ontario have 350 acres in cultivation? So Don's a master farmer, and he's really dedicated to make switchgrass a great crop in Ontario, and he's doing a fabulous job. And he spent about $700,000 just on the seed cleaning facility to optimize the quality for export. So Don consolidates all the seed in Ontario and cleans it up and exports it to Europe and to the US. So what we've really realized is that we need to harvest the material in the fall, at least some of it. I think most of it. And the reason for that is that if you put it down on the snow over winter, like we've done in the past, you tend to lose biomass over winter. Some years you get a spring where it comes early the spring and it's wet. It's difficult to harvest in the spring, causes compaction, and we can get molds on it if we want to use it as livestock feed, for example, dairy feed. So now what we've done is we've introduced early genetics into the switchgrass, and we've moved the materials up so we have high yielding, early maturing materials that we can harvest in September. And that we think opens up the window in terms of more livestock use. And also if you want to run a straw processing facility, you have material more year round or any other process. So what we want to do to do a sustainable fall harvest is harvest the crop at physiological maturity. So in corn, when the corn reaches physiological maturity, that's when you get the black layer. it's ready to harvest. With switchgrass, it needs to turn a yellow-green color so that it indicates that it's storing its reserves back into the ground. So it can be a long-lived perennial. And so when it's about sort of half yellow-green, like on this one, that's about the stage we want to harvest it. And that would typically happen about the third week of September in much of Ontario. And the other measure is that the seed becomes like hard dent. So when you put your teeth into it, it doesn't quite bust in half, but you get the idea. It's pretty hard. Hard dough stage, rather. And so this is actually at Don Nott's farm. He's harvesting a field of one of our early maturing varieties. And in September, I'll take you through that process. So he tries to lay a swath as wide as possible to get sunshine onto it and wind onto it, not too thick. Beauty of switchgrass is it doesn't compress like alfalfa. It kind of makes an aerobic windrow. So it actually dries faster than alfalfa. And if you crimp it and crush the stem and you put it in a wide swath, aerobic swath, this stuff dries pretty quickly, like faster than alfalfa. And then, for example, in this particular day, he baled it, he raked it before he baled it. And then we baled it up and it yielded 13.3 ton per hectare. Okay, and this isn't what we consider our highest yielding variety, but it shows the yield potential in Ontario for a fall harvested switchgrass. So miscanthus would have a higher biological yield in the fall, but you really can't harvest it in the fall. The time you get into it in the spring or in late winter, you've lost quite a few of those leaves. So the yield wouldn't necessarily even be 13.3 ton per hectare. We also have, you can see how clean that field is. There's very little fiber left in the field. If you see a miscanthus harvester system, you're leaving quite a bit of biomass in the field. So it's got some real advantages in terms of supply availability. And, you can have your switchgrass as a fall harvest crop in Ontario. And we've been working very hard with a lot of students. We've had a lot of students work with us over the years. We've had two graduate students from McGill that are doing their PhDs. And they've done a really great job with us and hardworking, really doing a nice job with us. And we're very, very pleased with our team that we've got working on switchgrass. I have a little video to play from, this is from Don Nott's farm near Clinton, Ontario.
The licensed growers of RC Big Rock developed from the original cave at Rock Seed. RC Big Rock has quickly become the #1 selling improved switchgrass seed in North America. RC switchgrass plant breeders are constantly upgrading and improving varieties by selecting for increased emergence and faster and more productive growth. RC switchgrass efficiently converts the sun's energy into productive plant matter. Taller and more erect plants are being created. Grows tall like corn, making the jobs of habitat managers and farmers easier and more productive. Nott farms are the processors and wholesale distributors of the full line of RC varieties. If you're interested in growing RC switchgrass for deer screening, cattle feed, animal bedding, or conservation, please contact one of the authorized RC switchgrass seed dealers in your area. RC switchgrass. Watch it grow.
I'm sure I would never have gotten that to play. Yeah, we'd like to thank all our partners through the years, and certainly OMAFRA through the years has been one of our best partners in terms of a research partner. And really pleased with how the Ontario farmers have embraced this opportunity. And yeah, we're super optimistic about where things are headed. Part of that is because we get the ag sector, from my standpoint, just looks like it's in a lot of trouble. So we not if we have time for questions.
You got 10 minutes. Any questions?
Roger, I've seen on Don's video there that the entertainment part of the equation is quite, something that's gonna be developed more. If you got switchgrass that you're growing specifically for deer habitat, such.
Yeah, like just to give you an idea of our markets. Like we thought our market was bioethanol and biofiber. This is like 30 years ago. And then we went into pellets. And nothing seemed to work. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we got these guys calling us up. They wanted switchgrass for habitat. What's that habitat? What's that? And it was like they wanted to plant it for deer hunting and for nature. And so we sell about 3/4 of our switchgrass right now to that sector, to hunters, because it hides the deer. And so that's been a great anchor market to start us off. But really, it's growing slowly. The farm sector for us this year has more than doubled. And so we're really excited about that. It's really kind of coming of age as a field crop. And we're really thankful to have the habitat sector, and we promote it because it's really great to teach people how to grow switchgrass. And a lot of these deer hunters are farmers. They got the land and they're learning how to grow it as a crop. So the agronomy, sort of a capacity building has been done through this switchgrass for habitat. You know, there's thousands of acres of switchgrass out there for deer hunting and for pheasants in places like South Dakota. So we have this new variety we call RC Haven, and that's specifically for upland birds. And there's thousands of acres being planted for upland birds. And the CRP, well, we had like 20-30 million acres of CRP in the 1990s. That's all going to come back. So a variety like RC Haven really fits nicely into that market. So yeah, there's this historic market of the habitat users, but like it's the pulp sector and the dairy farmers. Like in Quebec, we tripled our seed sales this year because they can't afford to grow spring cereals. They can't afford the fertilizer on the spring cereals. The spring cereals aren't worth anything because farm commodity prices are depressed. So they're learning that they can grow switchgrass. And if they feed switchgrass, instead of feeding wheat straw to their dairy cows, they don't see the veterinarian as often. So like, we think the dairy sector is a great sector that's going to grow. And I'm really personally quite excited about these building products that we saw, like the thermal insulation. There's these compressed straw walls being put together in Europe. I think that's a great technology. And the pulp and paper sector, like we use paper today. And the forests of Canada can't sustain the existing production. So what's going to happen? You're going to have resource substitution. It's the history of the world. You use up the easiest resource and then you move to the next. And the ethanol sector to me looks like it's due for a collapse. There's going to be a lot of farmland available. And the last time what happened is that more marginal land gets shifted over to perennial low input crops like switchgrass and other native grasses. Jeez.
I've heard you've been selling a bunch of seed to France as well. What's their primary resource there, you know?
Yeah, but over in France, I would say most of it's going to farmers. And so maybe a third's going to hunters. But they're planting it, some for straw, for bedding, some for feeding, and some is being pilot planted for pulp use. But the thing about France is that France has a climate that's a little bit like Minnesota, but with no summer rain. So they have unreliable summer rain. So wherever you see sunflowers in a landscape, that's a great territory for upland switchgrass. So I told Don Nott, I said, I think the market for switchgrass in France is bigger than the US because the climate is so suitable. If you see Van Gogh's paintings, they're full of sunflowers. And so we're hoping one day there's some painters that'll paint up some nice switchgrass fields for it.
So I have a question, Rogers, about the switchgrass. They are of different heights, like they can grow maximum up to high. So do you think this last one you talk about, this big rock, RC big rock, is that the highest in terms of the height can go?
Yeah, the question is, how tall will switchgrass
Yeah,
get?
yeah.
Well, switchgrass will get roughly, it can get about 10 feet.
Yeah, and the varieties, like how the varieties can
Yeah,
affect.
and the later the maturing the variety, the taller it gets. But our big blue stem is 12 feet tall, like 3.5 meters. And you saw how it's stemmy. So it's ideal for your bioprocessing. And the new switchgrasses, we can also fractionate it quite easily and use the high quality stems for your high fiber needs, stronger fiber. And so I think that we've got both big blue stem and switchgrass. And the reason we developed the big blue stem is we were afraid of long-term switchgrass monocultures in terms of diseases and pests. And we may not have to worry about gall midge, but there's other things we have to worry about. And big blue stem and switchgrass together in a field, at least in the east, can really produce like sustainable biomass for a 10-year period. So we're working on both. And we really have one of the longest sustained programs on big blue stem in Eastern North America. We have the only real like substantial upland switchgrass breeding program in North America right now, because the Americans are mostly focused on lowland switchgrass.
So, and in terms of the silica, is anybody like interested on the silica extraction from the switchgrass in our here province, or nobody has interest?
There was one plant that went into Missouri and they were looking at silica recovery.
But not in Canada.
No. I know that some people are interested in increasing silica in crops to help with the pest resistance. And some of the people in Europe that are looking to turn it into building supplies, they'd like more silica because it doesn't burn the building down. Because silica is, is fire resistant. Or you could just spray the wall, the processed fiber with silica.
They can be used in that fiber board,
Yeah, on the surface.
The fiber
On the-
board that flame resistance.
Yeah, for flame resistant, yeah. Joe?
I was just curious about the big blue stem. Assuming you have a switchgrass field that might be coming to the end of its maturity. Is it possible to aggressively rough up the switchgrass field and incorporate big blue stem and then have them coexist?
We can try a small area in your farm, Joe. Joe's been a great grower with us with switchgrass. And he has perfect soil type for big blue stem because it's a light soil. And big blue stem will beat up switchgrass on a soil like that. Like a sandy soil, if you mix switchgrass and big blue stem, if you get drought years, the big blue stem will crush the switchgrass. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Your intent is just biomass, it would be okay to say, it doesn't matter what it looks like at the end of the year, we're just gonna cut it.
yeah. So I think it's an idea that we should try at your farm, and I have some big blue stem seed for you to try.
And I also wondered about switchgrass alone. If I want to prolong it as it is, keep good quality seed head. What about an implement similar to a Great Plains vertical disc? Cut it up so that you got strips, you've beaten up, you've destroyed a lot of root ground, soften it up to make more, get rid of the crowding effect. I've
Yeah.
noticed with landscapers. Ornamental grass. When they come to the end, they have this hard core in the middle. It's like, well, we gotta cut it out, and start all over.
Yeah.
They're starting to go in the middle of it. They cut it completely out. They just eject and gone. And the survival on the rig, it just reassumes the area. And it's just as beautiful as it ever was.
Yeah, we've had switchgrass fields in Quebec for 17 years that maintain production. And the only reason we got rid of them was the head smut. So the real problem with the long-term switchgrass field is that you can get, at least in southern zones, you can get head smut like in year 10 or 12, just knock the switchgrass yield. And just what happens is the head smut will actually root proliferate through the root system. So the whole field becomes contaminated with head smut. But if you have a low head smut field or no head smut to start, we've had fields in Quebec up to 17 years. But I think with a big blue stem in the switchgrass, it'll sustain production. But I don't think you can rejuvenate an old switchgrass field by putting in new seed. Because it does it every year. It drops the seed load from the previous year. And usually what happens is farmers want to rotate anyway. And they've made their fields in a really nice condition with switchgrass after about 7 years. And we would love to see switchgrass turn into the new alfalfa for Ontario. And seed growers really like that idea. Go ahead.
Don was talking about permanent cover crop that we're looking at in Europe. How does that fit in here?
So one of the agencies that's involved in introducing switchgrass in Europe is an organization called MILPA. And they were looking at switchgrass as a kind of a living mulch. And so you would grow your winter annual cereal or winter faba beans when switchgrass is dormant. I think it's going to be pretty challenging, but I do think you could overseed like a winter legume in an environment like that. So Don tried to seed some winter barley into his existing switchgrass. And maybe if he harvested as a silage crop, the winter barley, it might make it. But I think it's the environment we have in Ontario. It's too strong a winter season, and the period to develop the spring cereal, the winter cereal before the switchgrass gets going is too short.
I think